What if the heart beating in your chest has memories of its own, distinct from the brain?
Hmm.
What if the very code that shapes you, your DNA, isn't a fixed blueprint, but more like a dimmer switch or a limiter on something much bigger?
Yeah, some really provocative ideas there.
Okay, so you're joining us for a deep dive. We've spent time with a fascinating stack of sources, articles, research papers, some incredibly thought-provoking notes,
A real mix, yeah.
and they propose a truly radical framework for understanding things like DNA, time, memory, even reality itself.
Right, and it's not just random ideas thrown together.
No, they're presented as building blocks for a picture that, as the sources put it, starts to make a lot of sense.
That's the phrase they use. It's about challenging conventional wisdom, seeing connections we usually miss, thinking about things like time not as fundamental, but emergent.
Exactly. And our mission here is to walk through this framework together piece by piece, following the logic in these sources.
Unpack the key insights.
See how these seemingly separate ideas weave together into this, well, this coherent, if unconventional, understanding.
Let's do it.
So let's jump right in. The sources start with the DNA. Now, we typically think of DNA as the master blueprint, right? The detailed
The
instruction.
salute code, yeah.
But these sources, completely different perspective. Okay, let's unpack this. They suggest DNA isn't the complete blueprint, it's a rate limiter.
Yes, it's a core idea.
Mm-hmm.
Instead of holding all the info, the sources say DNA provides constraints.
Mm.
It's less the full movie script
Mm-hmm.
and more like pacing notes or maybe circuit breakers.
Mm.
It dictates how quickly potential unfolds and which possibilities get expressed when.
So it prevents everything happening at once. Chaos.
Pretty much. It prevents that chaotic rush of infinite possibility.
So like a governor on an engine, it doesn't create the power, but it caps the speed.
That's a great analogy they use. Yeah, it prevents that state of infinite potential just collapsing into, well, nothing useful. It allows stable, ordered development.
But there's a trade-off.
The trade-off, according to this framework, is limiting access. Limiting the organism's access to the full spectrum of potential forms that might otherwise be available. Stability at the cost of possibility, maybe.
Okay, but what's the evidence for this? It sounds pretty out there.
Well, one key area the sources point to is Michael Levin's work, his bioelectric research.
Ah, yes. Heard a bit about that.
It's fascinating. He's shown that bioelectric signals, the electrical patterns across tissues, can actually override the developmental outcomes you'd expect just from the DNA.
Override them. Yeah.
Like inducing limb regeneration in frogs. Frogs don't normally do that. And he did it not by changing their genes,
Right.
but by manipulating the bioelectric state.
Mm.
It suggests the bioelectric field holds some kind of pattern memory, a map.
So the electrical state has memory that can trump the genetic code.
That's the implication. DNA interacts with it, responds to it, rather than just being the sole command center.
Wow. Okay, what else?
Then there's the C-value paradox. The fact that some organisms, like certain amoebas or even rice plants, have vastly more DNA than humans, but they aren't necessarily more complex.
Right, I remember that. Doesn't seem to make intuitive sense if DNA equals complexity.
Exactly. So the sources interpret this to mean DNA is more like a filter, or maybe a tuner, selecting and modulating expression from some deeper source, not generating complexity itself.
A huge library, but you only access certain books at certain times.
Something like that, yeah.
Yeah.
It's filtering or tuning what comes through.
Okay, so if DNA is limiting, controlling the rate from something, what is it limiting from? What's this deeper source?
Right. And this is where the framework takes a really significant leap. It connects DNA as a limiter to, well, to time itself.
Time. How does time fit in?
The sources propose that time isn't this fundamental backdrop we assume it is. It's something that emerges. And this is where it gets really interesting.
Okay.
Their core premise is time requires interaction, specifically photons, light.
Light creates time.
In a way, yes. Without photons mediating energy exchange, information transfer, there's no observable change. Nothing shifts detectably from state A to state B. Photons make difference detectable, and that detectability, that causal ordering, is time, according to the sources.
So time is created between events by light.
Essentially, yeah. They describe a spectrum. One end, total coherence, pure unity, maybe a quantum vacuum state, no difference.
No time.
No time.
Yeah.
The other end, total entropy, heat
Yeah.
death, complete disorder, no gradients, also no difference.
Also no time.
Right. Time emerges between those extremes, in the messy middle. where there's enough information density and energy flow and coherence to create distinguishable states, causal links.
Okay, there's a relationship they propose, a formula.
Yes, they refine it, but essentially time is proportional to information density times coherence divided by the rate of change.
Whoa, okay. Break that down. Information density, coherence.
Right, so coherence here means ordered structure, how synchronized and integrated a system is. Think laser light versus a light bulb.
Not that.
Information density is about the amount of meaningful pattern or organization within that system. A crystal is coherent, but maybe low complex information density compared to a living cell.
Okay. And rate of change.
Simply how fast that structured information is transforming. And they argue energy is that rate of change, the rate of change of structured coherence.
Okay, so back to the photon. The sources say a photon has extremely high coherence, but zero time experience. How does that prove anything? Seems weird.
This is what they see as the linchpin, the key insight. A photon, near perfect coherence, maximum rate of change, speed of light,
Right.
but zero time experience in its own frame. The sources say this isn't a paradox, it's the proof. Time isn't fundamental. It emerges from that ratio. Coherence, information density, rate of change. For a photon, that ratio collapses time to zero.
So time only appears when things decohere, interact.
Exactly. When systems interact, move out of perfect coherence, creating distinguishable moments relative to each other, that's when time emerges.
And this applies to biology, to aging.
Yes. Biological time aging, metabolism pace, is also seen as emergent, tied to this ratio. Mitochondria are key here.
The cell's powerhouses.
Right. They manage energy flow, cellular coherence, information processing, so they modulate internal time speed.
So if your mitochondria aren't working well, more entropy.
More decoherence. And in this model, that accelerates perceived biological time. Aging. Aging is seen as progressive decoherence.
Our sense of time, how fast we age, related to cellular coherence. That's a completely different way to think about getting older.
It reframes it entirely. Less just wear and tear, more loss of coherence relative to the rate of change.
Okay, this is building. DNA as limiter, time as emergent from this ratio. Then the sources bring in things that sound, well, fringe? Organ transplant memories? Near-death experiences?
Yeah, this is where they connect it to phenomena that challenge the brain as everything model.
How do they fit?
Well, if you consider these phenomena might be real transplant recipients getting donor traits, NDEs suggesting consciousness outside the brain, even speculative ideas like biophoton communication.
Yeah.
They point towards memory and consciousness, maybe not being purely physical or at least not solely located in the brain. They might be nonlocal, field-based.
Residing in a field the body interacts with.
That's the idea. Memory not just stored in neurons, but encoded in, say, bioelectric or quantum fields that tissues access. Organs act like resonant chambers, antennas.
And the heart is key here.
They put huge emphasis on the heart. It's not just a pump. Neurocardiology shows it has its own complex nervous system, the ICNS.
Intrinsic cardiac nervous system.
Over 40,000 neurons showing memory and learning signs, independent of the brain. And crucially, its magnetic field.
Is huge, right? Way bigger than the brain's.
Up to 5,000 times stronger, extending several feet out, carrying signals linked to our emotional states.
So the heart isn't just reacting to the brain, it's sending signals back, influencing it, and maybe interacting with this field.
Precisely. A powerful sensory and processing center, bidirectional communication with the brain, and potentially a primary antenna for these non-local fields.
And the transplant stories.
The sources cite specific cases, like the 8-year-old girl getting a heart, then having nightmares detailing her donor's murder. Details that apparently helped police.
That story is chilling.
It is. And while anecdotal, it's presented as consistent with the idea that the heart tissue itself somehow accessed donor-associated information, perhaps from this field, not stored solely in the donor's brain cells.
Makes you really pause and wonder where memory or even personality truly resides. This framework sees the body, especially the heart, as much more interactive.
Absolutely. Redefines the body's relationship with information.
Okay, next piece, spirals. The sources bring in geometry. Why are spirals so fundamental here?
They're proposed as more than just common shapes, DNA, galaxies, shells. They're seen as fundamental dynamic operators.
Operators.
Yeah, the most efficient geometry for managing the flow and transformation of energy, information, coherence. They describe how coherence and information density change through space and this emergent time.
So the shape itself does something.
Think about moving along a spiral. Density changes, rate of change shifts, coherence alters, all in a patterned way. Spirals are the geometry through which Energy, info, coherence, time are converted and regulated. Each turn compresses space-time, accelerates coherence, directs entropy into order.
They're the physical expression of emergent time, the bridge from potential to form.
That's how the sources frame it, yes.
And DNA is a double helix, a spiral. How does that connect to it being a rate limiter?
Not a coincidence at all, according to the sources. It's core to its function in this model. The spiral structure is inherently rate damping.
Slows things down.
Exactly. It slows the unfolding of potential from the field over developmental time, channels it through this winding path, preventing chaos. It is the speed limit mechanism.
And light interacts with this.
Yes, not just structurally causing damage, but informationally, functionally. Because DNA is this spiral-based, time-reactive processor, light carries coherence and info. So light hitting DNA's spiral can potentially re-encode or modulate biological time, alter the temporal evolution of the organism's coherent information.
So light hitting our DNA could literally influence our internal clock. Wow, this framework really pulls threads together.
That's the aim, to build something where these disparate pieces start to fit, to make sense as a whole system.
Okay, let's zoom out. DNA limiter, time emergent ratio, body heart antenna, spiral slide organizers. What's the fundamental cause? Why organize at all? The sources ask this even before DNA, RNA world, self-organization happened. Stuff didn't just pop into complexity, right?
Right, that's the ultimate question they tackle.
Yeah.
If DNA, RNA are tools, what started it all? It implies something prior, something pre-physical.
A bias in the universe.
Essentially, yes.
Yeah.
An underlying field, a pressure, a drive towards order, a fundamental coherence-seeking principle.
What do they call it?
Various terms are used.
Yeah.
Morphogenetic field, quantum potential, biofield, informational substrate, or just a self-organizing coherence drive. The core idea is a principle existing before matter, pulling potential into form.
And spirals are part of this.
Spirals, vortices, fractals, seen as the default attractors. The shapes, energy, and information naturally flow into within this field. Life, then?
Isn't just a random accident.
Potentially not. Maybe it's more like a phase transition. When energy flow, information density, coherence cross a threshold locally, structure, feedback loops, stable information emerge. What we call life.
So life and complexity aren't just random mutations plus selection, but expressions of this underlying cosmic drive.
That's the core argument. The driver isn't just chance acting on DNA, it's this pre-physical, coherence-seeking field. Encoded via spirals, expressed via light, gated by emergent time, DNA sells us. We're downstream tools interacting with that field. Humans as the current local resolution of this pressure to be.
Okay, one more crucial element the sources bring in, water. Why is water so central?
It's highlighted as the field's physical memory medium, the primary physical interface.
Why water?
It's unique. It stores structure through those hydrogen bond networks without fixed form. It responds instantly to fields, light, sound, EM. It exhibits coherence. It's the bridge between the non-local field and physical biology.
Like lifting a rock underwater being easier.
Yeah.
The sources mention that, not just buoyancy.
Exactly. Water distributing force information through its dynamic structure. And we are mostly water, by molecule count.
So we aren't just containing water.
We are coherent water structures in this model. DNA, proteins, etc. are components within that water matrix, like resonant chambers interacting with fields passing through the water. We're built to receive and modulate the field via our water.
And they connect this to ancient practices, baptism, stained glass.
Yeah, they interpret things like baptism potentially as a structural information reset via water, re-entraining the body to the field's coherence. Stained glass is structured light, altering photon coherence in a space. Holy water is memory-laden water, field portals maybe. Ancient practices possibly engaging this water-body field interface.
Wild. That ancient rituals might have intuitively worked with these principles. Okay, so we've walked through it. DNA limiter, emergent time ratio, coherence field driver, spirals light organizers, water medium, hard interface. It does hang together. It builds piece by piece to something that, yeah, within its own logic starts to make a lot of sense. But so what? What does this mean for us? Is it just theory or can we use it?
Exactly the question the sources pivot to. They anticipate the highly speculative reaction and ask, okay, but is it useful? Can this framework help us do something? Heal faster, age slower, feel more alive, guide emergence?
And the answer is?
The core practical implication is focus on optimizing that ratio. Coherence, information density, rate of change. It's not just about maxing out coherence, they stress. It's the dynamic balance.
How do we do that? What's the how to use part say?
Concrete things. Optimize light exposure quality, timing. optimize structure movement, posture, even be in nature with its fractal geometry.
Yeah.
Optimize breath-controlling internal rhythm, redox balance.
Affecting mitochondria.
Yes, increasing mitochondrial coherence via light, redox. Reconnect with spiral time, rhythmic routines, reflection, awareness of cycles. Engage the field meditation, nature time, paying attention to intuition, non-local info. And design environments that hold coherence, natural materials, fractals, avoiding disruptive fields.
They mention a specific practice, too, the spiral hold. What's that?
It's described as one protocol to directly engage the ratio. Typically involves structured breathing, like maybe 4-second inhale, 18-second hold, 8-second exhale.
Long hold.
Yeah. Combined with spiral visualization, focusing on a structured emotional memory that's the information density piece and intention towards light.
And the goal.
By intentionally playing with breath hold, rate of change, coherent thought emotion, info coherence, light spirals, the idea is to momentarily shift that fundamental ratio, maybe collapse local time perception, increase field access, reset mitochondrial rhythm, access deeper templates for reorganization.
And this framework potentially answers big questions.
They propose a field answer matrix, tackling things like the C-value paradox, regeneration without genetic change, variations in biological time, the nature of aging as decoherence.
Wow. So what does this all mean then? It means this isn't just abstract. This framework suggests our reality, health, aging, time perception, memory access isn't fixed. It might be dynamically shaped by how we manage these ratios of information, coherence, change. Mediated by light and water, organized by spirals.
Suggests we might have more agency than we think.
Far more agency in shaping our own reality and connecting to deeper potentials than conventional science usually assumes.
Right.
If our experience of reality is constantly emerging from this interplay, coherence, information, rate of change, and our bodies, these water-based spiral-organized systems, are antennas for an underlying coherence-seeking field, well then maybe consciously working with these principles offers entirely new pathways for health, for vitality, for understanding ourselves, something for you to mull over as you navigate the emergent reality of your own day.